My name is Ruby, and I'm 23 years old from a middle-class family in Seattle. Throughout high school, I sacrificed everything to earn my college fund of $120,000. I never imagined my own parents would betray me by giving all that money to my entitled sister for a house down payment. The worst part wasn't losing my future, it was the moment they actually laughed at my distress, as if my dreams meant nothing compared to hers. Years of hard work vanished in an instant, leaving me devastated and alone. Before I tell you how I discovered my parents' betrayal, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely. I grew up in the rainy city of Seattle with my parents and my older sister, Sophia. From the earliest days I can remember, there was always a difference in how my parents treated us. Sophia was 4 years older than me, and in my parents' eyes, she could do no wrong. She was their golden child, the one who got everything she wanted with minimal effort or justification. My parents, James and Linda Wilson, weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. Dad worked as a sales manager at a local car dealership, and Mom was an administrative assistant at an insurance company. We lived in a modest three-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood with good schools, which was important to my grandparents. Sophia was beautiful, outgoing, and charismatic from a young age. She had this ability to charm adults with her big smile and confidence. When she wanted something, whether it was a new toy clothes or later a car, she knew exactly how to convince our parents. Her room was always filled with the latest gadgets and fashion. While I learned quickly that asking for things usually resulted in lectures about money being tight, I was different from Sophia in almost every way. While she was loud and demanded attention, I was quieter and more observant. I enjoyed reading books and excelled in school without needing to be pushed. By the time I was 10, I had already accepted that in our family hierarchy, Sophia's wants would always come before my needs. My saving grace was my grandparents, especially my grandfather William. He was a retired high school principal who valued education above all else. He saw something in me that my parents seemed to miss: potential determination and a genuine love of learning. When I was 12, Grandpa William made me a promise that would shape my future goals. We were sitting on his porch swing during one of my weekend visits, and I was telling him about my dream of becoming a doctor. "Ruby," he said, looking at me with seriousness I rarely saw, "if you maintain excellent grades through high school, your grandmother and I will help fund your college education. We believe in you." That promise became my North Star. While other teenagers were focused on social media and parties, I divided my time between studying and working part-time jobs. By 16, I was juggling honor roll classes with weekend shifts at a local coffee shop. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account labeled Future Medical School. My grandparents were immensely proud. They would come to every academic award ceremony and celebration, even when my parents had excuses about needing to attend one of Sophia's many social events. Grandma Margaret would slip me $20 bills for your fund. With a wink, that was our little secret. When I was 17, tragedy struck our family. Grandpa William passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. 3 months later, Grandma Margaret followed what many called dying of a broken heart. Their loss devastated me in ways I couldn't articulate. They had been my greatest supporters, the ones who saw value in my dedication and hard work. At the reading of their will, I learned that they had set aside $120,000 specifically for my education. The money was placed in a trust managed by my parents until I turned 18, with explicit instructions that it was for my college expenses. My parents assured the attorney that they would honor my grandparents' wishes. "Don't worry, Ruby," my dad said as we drove home from the attorney's office. "We'll make sure this money goes exactly where your grandparents intended." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Despite their favoritism towards Sophia, they had never outright lied to me before. With my college funds secured, I threw myself even more intensely into my studies. I graduated valedictorian of my class, earning a partial merit scholarship to Washington University, where I planned to start my pre-med program. My parents attended my graduation, though they left early when Sophia called with some emergency about her boyfriend. Meanwhile, Sophia's life after high school had been less structured. She attended community college sporadically, never finishing her degree. She bounced between retail jobs, always quitting when they became too stressful or when managers didn't appreciate her value. She lived at home rent-free while my parents covered her car payments, insurance, and credit card bills. By 23, Sophia had cycled through 6 jobs and 3 serious boyfriends. The latest Mark had proposed after 6 months of dating. My parents were ecstatic, treating the engagement like it was a royal wedding in the making. Every family dinner became a planning session for their future nuptials. When I asked Sophia about their plans after marriage, she waved her hand dismissively. Mark's family has money, but they're so traditional. They won't help with the house until we're married. It's so unfair to make us wait. I nodded sympathetically, but thought to myself that most people our age couldn't afford homes yet. I was still planning to live in a tiny apartment during medical school, pinching pennies and living on ramen. As my first semester of college approached, I was filled with excitement and anticipation. I had been accepted to Washington University's prestigious pre-med program with a partial scholarship. While it didn't cover everything, I had my grandparents' fund and my own savings to fill the gap. I spent hours researching textbooks, dorm essentials, and the most efficient meal plans. 2 weeks before orientation, I sat down with my parents to discuss accessing my college fund. The money would need to be transferred soon to cover my first year's tuition and housing deposit. It was time to put my grandparents' gift to its intended use, launching me toward the future they had helped me envision. I had no idea that conversation would change everything. The day I discovered my parents' betrayal started like any other summer morning. I had spreadsheets open on my laptop, meticulously planning my college budget. Washington University wasn't cheap, but between my partial scholarship savings from my barista job and my grandparents' fund, I had calculated that I could graduate with minimal debt. All I needed was to finalize the paperwork to access my college fund. I found my parents in the kitchen that morning. Dad was reading news on his tablet while Mom prepared breakfast. Sophia had already moved out temporarily, staying with Mark until their wedding. "Morning," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Do you have time to talk about the college fund today? The tuition deposit is due next week." I noticed an uncomfortable glance pass between them. Mom suddenly became very interested in the eggs she was scrambling, while Dad cleared his throat. "Actually, Ruby, we need to discuss something with you," he said, setting down his tablet. "Why don't you sit down?" The serious tone in his voice sent a chill through me. I sat across from him, clutching my coffee mug. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom turned off the stove and joined us, her face unreadable. "We've had to make some financial decisions recently," she began. "What kind of decisions?" My stomach tightened with each word. Dad leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "The thing is, Ruby, the money from your grandparents, it's no longer available." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "What do you mean, no longer available?" "It's in a trust for my education." "Where did it go?" Another glance between my parents. Mom spoke next. "We had to make a family decision. Sophia and Mark needed help with their down payment for a house. The wedding is coming up, and they want to start their life together properly." I stared at them, waiting for the punchline of what had to be a terrible joke. "You're saying you gave my college fund to Sophia for a house? We gave her a loan," Dad corrected, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "She's family too, Ruby. She needed it more right now. You're smart, you can get scholarships." "A loan?" I repeated numbly. "All of it? The entire $120,000. Mom nodded. "They found the perfect starter home. 3 bedrooms so they can start a family soon. Without the down payment, they would have lost it." My hands began to shake. "But that money wasn't yours to give. Grandma and Grandpa left it specifically for my education." "Ruby," Dad said with growing irritation, "you need to understand how families work. Sometimes one child needs more help than another. Sophia has Mark to think about now and their future." "What about my future?" My voice cracked. "I start college in 2 weeks. The money was meant for my education. It's what Grandma and Grandpa wanted." That's when it happened. Dad let out a small chuckle and shook his head. Mom's lips curved into a smile as she reached across to pat my hand condescendingly. "Oh, honey," she said. "You've always been so dramatic. It's just money. You'll figure something out, you always do." They were laughing. actually laughing at my distress, as if my entire future crumbling before my eyes was somehow amusing, as if the betrayal of not only me but also my grandparents' wishes was a trivial matter. Just money, I whispered, pulling my hand away. It was my future, my dream, everything I've worked for. You can take out student loans like everyone else, Dad said with a dismissive wave, or start at community college and transfer later. Sophia needed a house now. You'll understand when you're older and have a family of your own. I sat there, tears welling in my eyes, unable to process the magnitude of what they had done. Does Sophia know where the money came from? Of course she does, Mom replied. She's very grateful. That afternoon, I drove to Sophia's new house, still numb with shock. I needed to hear from her directly. The house was in an upscale neighborhood with manicured lawns and luxury cars and driveways. The kind of place I couldn't have afforded, even after becoming a doctor. Sophia answered the door in yoga pants and a designer top, looking surprised to see me. Ruby, what are you doing here? Did you know? I demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. Did you know the down payment for this house came from my college fund? She had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but it passed quickly. Mom and Dad told you. Look, it's not a big deal. They said I can pay it back eventually. Not a big deal, I repeated incredulously. Sophia, that was $120,000 meant for my education. I start college in 2 weeks and now I have nothing. She rolled her eyes. You're being so dramatic. Just take out loans like normal people. Everyone has student debt these days. She gestured behind her. Want to see the house? The kitchen has marble countertops. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I don't care about your marble countertops. That money wasn't Mom and Dad's to give you. Grandma and Grandpa left it specifically for my education. Well, they're not here anymore, are they? Sophia replied coldly. Besides, Mark and I are starting a family. We need this more than you need some fancy university. You can go to community college for a couple of years. Something broke inside me then. The sister I had grown up with, who I had always tried to maintain a relationship with despite her selfishness, was standing in a house bought with my future, completely unmoved by what that meant for me. I turned and walked away without another word, her calls of, "You're overreacting," following me to my car. That evening, I sat in my room surrounded by college brochures and acceptance letters that now seemed like cruel jokes. Years of hard work, sacrifices, and planning had vanished in an instant. I couldn't afford Washington University without the fund. My partial scholarship wouldn't cover even half of what I needed. Through tears, I called my academic advisor at the university, explaining my situation in a shaky voice. She was sympathetic but realistic about my options: defer enrollment and try for more scholarships, take out substantial loans, or consider less expensive schools. None of these had been part of my carefully constructed plan. Later, I reached out to Ms. Winters, my high school chemistry teacher who had written my college recommendation letters. Unlike my parents, her shock and outrage validated that what had happened wasn't normal. Ruby, what they did wasn't just unfair, it was potentially illegal, she said. That money was designated for your education. Her words planted a seed that would later grow into action. But that night, I simply cried until I had no tears left, mourning not just the loss of my college fund, but the shattering of my trust in the people who should have protected my future. The weeks following the revelation about my college fund were some of the most difficult of my life. My carefully planned future had collapsed, and I was scrambling to pick up the pieces while dealing with the emotional aftermath of my family's betrayal. My first priority was finding a way to still attend college. I called Washington University's financial aid office and explained my situation, hoping for emergency assistance. The woman on the phone was sympathetic, but explained that last-minute financial aid packages were extremely limited. The best they could offer was to defer my acceptance for a year while I sought alternative funding. "I'm so sorry, Ruby," she said. "This happens more often than you'd think with family financial situations. Take the deferment and use the year to apply for every scholarship you can find." It was a crushing blow, but I had no choice. I accepted the deferment with a promise to myself that I would find a way back. With college temporarily out of reach, I needed to reassess my living situation. The thought of continuing to live under my parents' roof was unbearable. Every morning at breakfast, I'd see them checking their phones for updates from Sophia about house renovations or wedding plans, completely oblivious to the fact that they had derailed my future. I reached out to my friend Jasmine, who was renting an apartment with two other roommates near the community college. They had a couch I could sleep on until I figured things out. "Stay as long as you need," Jasmine insisted when I tried to give her rent money. "What your parents did is messed up." The day I moved out, my parents seemed genuinely surprised. Mom followed me around as I packed my clothes and books. "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this," she said. "Lots of students take a gap year. It could be good for you to work and save up." "I'm not taking a gap year by choice," I replied, folding a sweater with more force than necessary. "You stole my college fund and gave it to Sophia for a house she doesn't need." "We did not steal anything," Dad interjected from the doorway. "We made a family decision about family money, and I don't appreciate your tone." I turned to face him. It wasn't family money. It was my money from Grandma and Grandpa specifically for my education. You had no right to give it away. "Ruby Jean Wilson," Mom said in her warning voice. "Your sister needed help establishing her new life with Mark. One day when you're married, we'll help you too." I laughed bitterly. "So I have to get married to deserve support? What about my education, my career goals? Did those ever matter to you?" "Of course they matter," Dad said unconvincingly. "But sometimes life doesn't go according to plan. You need to be flexible." "Flexible doesn't mean watching my college fund turn into Sophia's marble countertops." I zipped my suitcase closed. "I'll be staying with Jasmine until I figure things out. Don't worry, I won't be asking you for money." Mom's eyes widened. "You're moving out. Don't you think you're overreacting?" "No, Mom, I don't. In fact, I think I'm finally seeing things clearly for the first time." I walked out that day and didn't look back. The hardest part wasn't leaving my childhood home. It was accepting that I couldn't count on the people who were supposed to support me unconditionally. With no college fund and limited savings, I had to find full-time work immediately. I increased my hours at the coffee shop and picked up a second job waiting tables at a busy restaurant downtown. Between the two, I was working nearly 70 hours a week. My new routine was grueling, opening the coffee shop at 5 in the morning, taking afternoon classes at the community college, where I'd hastily enrolled, then waiting tables until midnight. I would collapse on Jasmine's couch for a few hours before starting the cycle again. The physical exhaustion almost helped distract from the emotional pain. I enrolled in core prerequisite classes at the community college, determined to keep my education moving forward, even if it wasn't the path I had planned. The campus wasn't Washington University with its state-of-the-art labs and renowned professors, but I forced myself to focus on the knowledge rather than the setting. My phone buzzed constantly with text messages from Sophia, who seemed oblivious to the gravity of what had happened. She sent photos of furniture deliveries and paint samples, asking for my opinion as if nothing had changed between us. "Blue or green for the guest bedroom? You can stay there when you visit." Read one particularly tone-deaf message. I stopped responding after a while. What could I possibly say? My parents attempted reconciliation in their own misguided way. Mom left voicemails asking when I was coming home, and Dad sent emails explaining that families need to stick together during disagreements. Neither acknowledged the fundamental breach of trust or offered to make things right. About 2 months after moving out, I received an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner, as if nothing had happened. The card mentioned that Sophia and Mark would be hosting in their new home, my home purchased with my future. I declined. The holiday season was particularly difficult. While working double shifts at the restaurant on Thanksgiving, I saw families celebrating together, and the contrast with my own fractured family cut deep. I volunteered to work Christmas too, preferring time and a half pay to sitting alone in the apartment while Jasmine visited her family. During this period, I discovered another betrayal. My father had told extended family members that I had turned down my grandparents' money for college, preferring to find my own way. This explained why none of my aunts or uncles had questioned my sudden change in plans. When I ran into my cousin Madison at the mall, she congratulated me on my independence. "Dad said you told Uncle James you didn't want handouts for college." "That's so mature of you," she said admiringly. I was stunned. That's not what happened at all. I told her and explained the truth. Madison was horrified. That's so messed up. I'm going to tell my dad. Word spread through the family, creating divided loyalties. Some relatives believed my parents had the right to reallocate the money as they saw fit. Others were outraged on my behalf. My Aunt Cynthia, my mother's sister, called me directly. "Your grandparents would be heartbroken," she said firmly. "That money was for your education, not Sophia's lifestyle upgrade." Having even a few family members validate my feelings helped, but it didn't solve my financial reality. I was barely keeping up with community college tuition while working my two jobs. The stress affected my concentration, and for the first time in my life, I was struggling academically. Physical exhaustion combined with emotional trauma made simple tasks like reading assignments feel insurmountable. My friend Jasmine noticed my declining health. "Ruby, you can't keep going like this. You're killing yourself." She was right. I had lost weight, developed dark circles under my eyes, and caught every cold that circulated. But I couldn't see an alternative. Washington University was holding my spot for the following fall semester, and I was determined to have enough saved by then to at least cover the first year's tuition. I began researching student loans, something I had hoped to avoid. The projected debt was staggering for medical school, especially without my fund as a foundation. I calculated I would be paying off loans well into my 40s if I continued on my planned path. For the first time, I questioned whether I should abandon my dream of becoming a doctor. Maybe my parents were right that I needed to be flexible. The thought made me physically ill. 6 months into this new reality, I was surviving, but not thriving. I had saved some money, but nowhere near what I needed. I was passing my classes, but not excelling. I was functioning physically, but emotionally drained. Something needed to change, but I couldn't see a way forward that didn't involve compromising the future I had worked so hard for. Then came the moment that pushed me from despair to determination. 6 months after discovering my parents' betrayal, I was scrolling through Instagram during my lunch break at the coffee shop when I saw a post from Sophia showing off her newly renovated kitchen. Gleaming stainless steel appliances, custom cabinetry, and yes, the marble countertops she had bragged about. The caption read, "Home sweet home, thanks Mom and Dad for making our dream house possible. Hash blessed, had newlyweds, hash dream home." The comments were full of congratulations and heart emojis. My mother had commented, "So proud of our investment in your future." My father added, "Nothing makes a father happier than seeing his daughter in her own beautiful home." I stared at those comments for a long time. Our investment. As if the money had been theirs to invest. As if my future wasn't even a consideration. My manager noticed my expression. "You okay, Ruby? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I said, automatically pocketing my phone. But I wasn't fine. I was seething. Later that week, I saw another post from Sophia complaining about her mortgage payment being such a drag on our lifestyle. A mutual friend commented that at least she had a house, to which Sophia replied, "True, but Mark and I want to travel more. Mom and Dad might help with payments for a while, lol." They weren't even making the full mortgage payments themselves. The money from my college fund had bought them a house they couldn't actually afford, and my parents were continuing to subsidize their lifestyle. I did some calculations. If Sophia and Mark couldn't afford the monthly payments on a house with a $120,000 down payment, they had no business buying it in the first place. They had taken my future and turned it into a financial burden they couldn't even manage responsibly. The breaking point came unexpectedly on a Friday evening in July. I was having dinner with Jasmine at a new restaurant downtown when I spotted them. My parents, Sophia and Mark, seated at a large table near the window, celebrating something with champagne. They were laughing carefree while I was working two jobs and taking night classes to salvage what remained of my dreams. I don't know what came over me, but I found myself walking toward their table before Jasmine could stop me. Their laughter died as they noticed me standing there still in my coffee shop uniform, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, exhaustion evident on my face. "Ruby," my mother said, surprise and discomfort crossing her features. "What are you doing here?" "Having dinner," I replied. "What are you celebrating?" An awkward silence fell over the table. Mark shifted uncomfortably. He had always seemed uneasy around me since the house purchase. Mark got a promotion. Sophia finally answered. Junior sales manager. Congratulations, I said flatly. Must be nice to celebrate while not worrying about how to pay for your education. My father's jaw tightened. Ruby, this is neither the time nor place for this discussion. When is the time, Dad? When I'm working my third job? When I have to drop out of school completely? When exactly should we discuss how you stole my future? People at nearby tables were beginning to stare. My mother noticed and plastered on a fake smile. Sweetheart, why don't you join us? We can talk about this as a family. Family? I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Is that what we are? Because from where I'm standing, I'm the only one who's not part of this family anymore. Sophia rolled her eyes dramatically. Here we go again with the victim routine. It's just money, Ruby. Get over it already. Something inside me snapped. Just money. It was $120,000 that Grandma and Grandpa saved specifically for my education. It was my future. It was their legacy to me. And you took it for granite countertops and hardwood floors in a house you can't even afford without Mom and Dad still paying your bills. The restaurant had gone quiet. My father stood up, his face red with either embarrassment or anger. That's enough, Ruby. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene. You stole my college fund, lied to the family about it, and you think I'm the problem here. Do you have any idea what my life has been like for the past 6 months? Working 70-hour weeks, sleeping on a friend's couch, taking night classes because I can't afford full-time tuition. A woman at the next table spoke up unexpectedly. You took your daughter's college fund to buy your other daughter a house. The judgment in her voice was unmistakable. My father glared at her. This is a private family matter. Not anymore, I said. Not when you lie about it and make me out to be the ungrateful one. My mother reached for my hand, which I pulled away. Ruby, you're overreacting. We always planned to help both our daughters. Your time will come too. My time was now, Mom. I had a spot at Washington University. I had worked my entire life for this opportunity. And you threw it away because Sophia wanted a fancy house before she could afford it. Mark, to his credit, looked deeply uncomfortable. Maybe we should have waited until we had saved more, he said quietly to Sophia, who shot him a venomous look. Don't you dare side with her, she hissed. The house is perfect, and we deserved it. Deserved it, I repeated. What exactly have you done to deserve my college fund? Sophia, drop out of community college. Quit every job when it got hard. Live off Mom and Dad well into your 20s. Sophia stood up now too, her face flushed. At least I'm not a boring bookworm with no social life. At least I found someone who wants to marry me. The cruelty of her words hung in the air. I felt tears, threatening, but refused to let them fall. Keep the money, I said, my voice suddenly calm. Keep the house. Keep your perfect family. I'm done trying to make you understand what you've taken from me. But know this, someday when you need me, I won't be there. You've made your choice about what matters in this family, and it isn't me. I turned and walked away, ignoring my father calling my name. Jasmine quickly paid our bill and followed me out. Once in her car, the tears I had been holding back finally came in great heaving sobs. I don't have a family anymore, I whispered between breaths. Jasmine squeezed my hand. That's not true. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you when it matters. That night, sitting in Jasmine's car in an empty parking lot, I cried until I had no tears left. I questioned everything about my upbringing, my relationship with my parents, and my own worth in their eyes. Had I ever truly been valued? Or was I always just the reliable daughter they didn't need to worry about the one they could take from, because I would figure things out on my own? I drove to a scenic overlook outside the city and sat watching the sunrise, feeling completely alone in the world. At my lowest point, I wondered if my dream of becoming a doctor was worth the struggle I was facing. Maybe I should just accept a different path, one with lower obstacles. But as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, something shifted inside me. The helplessness and despair began to transform into something else, determination. I was tired of being the victim in this story. If my parents wouldn't do what was right, Maybe there were other options I hadn't considered. My grandparents had intended that money for my education. There had to be a way to honor their wishes and reclaim my future, even if it meant taking difficult action against my own family. The morning after the restaurant confrontation, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Crying in that parking lot had been cathartic, releasing emotions I'd been suppressing while trying to survive. Now, wiping away the last of my tears, I made a decision I would stop being a victim and start fighting for what was rightfully mine. My first step was scheduling an appointment with the financial aid counselor at the community college. Ms. Ramirez had always been supportive, but I had never fully explained my situation, embarrassed by my family's betrayal. "I've seen cases like yours before," she said, after I detailed what had happened. "While I'm not a legal expert, there might be grounds for action if your grandparents specified the money was for your education." She referred me to a legal aid clinic that offered free consultations for students. Talk to them. Know your options before making any decisions. And then 2 days later, I sat in a small office across from Patricia Mendez, a lawyer who specialized in family financial disputes. I brought what little documentation I had: a copy of my grandparents' will, that my aunt had found bank statements showing the transfer of funds to my parents as trustees, and screenshots of Sophia's social media posts about the house. Patricia reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Ruby, based on what you've shown me, your parents may have committed a breach of fiduciary duty. Your grandparents clearly designated those funds for your education, making your parents trustees, not owners of the money." Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in months. "What does that mean?" "It means you might have legal recourse to recover the funds." She leaned forward. "But I need to be clear. Pursuing this would mean filing a lawsuit against your parents. Are you prepared for what that could mean for your relationship with them?" I thought about the past 6 months, about working double shifts while Sophia posted pictures of her renovations, about sleeping on a couch while my dreams slipped further away. "What relationship?" I replied quietly. "They've made it clear where their priorities lie." Patricia nodded sympathetically. "Let me make some calls. The legal aid clinic might be able to take your case pro bono given the circumstances." The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. The legal aid clinic agreed to represent me, seeing my case as an opportunity to establish precedent for protecting educational trusts. We gathered more evidence, including testimony from the attorney who had handled my grandparents' estate, and from family members who remembered discussions about the college fund. My Aunt Cynthia proved invaluable, finding emails where my grandfather had explicitly discussed setting up the fund for my medical school dreams. She also discovered that my parents had signed documents acknowledging the purpose of the trust. When the lawsuit papers were prepared, I felt a moment of hesitation. This would permanently alter my relationship with my family. But I remembered my grandfather's belief in me, his pride when I spoke of becoming a doctor. I thought of all the nights I'd studied while friends were partying, all the weekends I'd worked to save for expenses beyond tuition. I owed it to myself and to my grandparents' memory to fight for what they had intended. The papers were served to my parents on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was exploding with messages. From Dad: "How could you do this to your family after everything we've done for you?" From Mom: "This is breaking my heart, Ruby. We raised you better than this." From Sophia: "You selfish bitch. You're trying to take away our home because you're jealous." I didn't respond to any of them. My lawyer had advised against direct communication now that legal proceedings had begun. Word spread quickly through our extended family and social circle. People took sides. Some saw me as the villain suing my own parents out of spite. Others recognized the injustice and supported my decision. Former teachers and neighbors, even parents of high school friends, reached out with messages of encouragement. "Your grandparents would be proud of you standing up for yourself," wrote my high school guidance counselor. "They always spoke so highly of your determination." The legal process moved slowly, with preliminary hearings and attempts at mediation. My parents' attorney argued that as trustees, they had discretion in how to allocate the funds for the family's benefit. Our side countered with the explicit language in my grandparents' will and trust documents, specifying the educational purpose. Throughout this period, I continued working and studying. If anything, the lawsuit gave me renewed focus. Each early morning shift, each late night class became steps toward reclaiming my future rather than just surviving the present. 3 months into the legal proceedings, I received an unexpected visitor at the coffee shop. Mark Sophia's husband asked to speak with me privately during my break. "I didn't know about the money, Ruby," he said, looking genuinely distressed. "Not at first. Sophia told me it was a gift from your parents from their savings. I only learned the truth when the lawsuit papers arrived." "And now that you know?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. "It isn't right. I've told Sophia we should sell the house and return the money, but she refuses. She says it's too late, that we've already renovated and invested more into it." His visit changed nothing legally, but it validated my fight. Someone from their side recognized the wrong that had been done. The case gained unexpected attention when a local news station ran a story about educational trust disputes, featuring my situation anonymously. The public reaction was overwhelmingly supportive of the student me, with many comments expressing outrage at parents who would divert educational funds to another child. My father called the night after the news segment aired. "This is humiliating, Ruby. People at work are talking. They don't know it's us yet, but it's just a matter of time." "I'm sorry you're embarrassed, Dad," I replied, breaking my silence for the first time. I was embarrassed too when I had to tell Washington University I couldn't attend because my college fund had been given away. "We can work this out privately," he insisted. "Drop the lawsuit. We'll figure something out for your school." "Like what you've already spent the money. Sophia's not selling the house. What exactly are you offering?" His silence told me everything. There was no plan, no solution, just a desire to avoid public accountability. 6 months after filing the lawsuit, we finally got a court date. Walking into the courthouse that morning was one of the most difficult moments of my life. Across the room, my parents sat with their attorney, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Sophia sat behind them, glaring at me with undisguised hatred. Mark wasn't present. The judge, an older woman with penetrating eyes, reviewed the case thoroughly. She questioned both attorneys sharply, clearly bothered by certain aspects of the situation. "Let me understand this better," she said to my parents' attorney. "Your clients were entrusted with funds specifically designated for their younger daughter's education. Instead, they used the entire amount as a down payment on a house for their older daughter who was not named in the trust. Your Honor, my clients made what they believed was a reasonable family financial decision. The older daughter had an immediate need." The judge raised an eyebrow. "A need for a house with marble countertops versus a need for college tuition. Interesting prioritization." When she called me to testify, I spoke from the heart about my grandparents' support of my educational goals, about the years of work toward medical school, about the shock of discovering the money was gone. "Why pursue legal action?" she asked me directly. "Why not try to work this out within the family?" "I tried, Your Honor," I answered honestly. "For 6 months, I tried to make them understand what they had taken from me. They laughed at my distress. They told me to just take out loans or go to community college. They showed no remorse or intention to make this right." My mother sobbed loudly at this. My father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. After 2 days of testimony, including from the estate attorney and family members who knew my grandparents' intentions, the judge delivered her ruling. This court finds that James and Linda Wilson violated their fiduciary duty as trustees of William and Margaret Johnson's educational trust for their granddaughter Ruby Wilson. The terms of the trust were explicit, and the diversion of funds for another purpose represents a clear breach of both legal obligation and familial trust. She ordered my parents to repay the entire $120,000 plus interest within 90 days. If they couldn't produce the funds, Sophia and Mark's house would need to be sold to satisfy the judgment. As the reality of the ruling sank in, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. I had won, but at what cost? The relationships might be irreparable. Yet underneath the sadness was something else: vindication. My grandparents' wishes would be honored. My future was back in my hands. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, having caught wind of the case's resolution. I declined to comment, walking past cameras with my head down. This victory was personal, not a media event. That evening, alone in the small apartment I had recently been able to rent, I allowed myself to truly process what had happened. I had stood up for myself against the people who should have been my strongest advocates. I had fought for my future and won. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was mine again. My phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. Mark had sent a simple message. "The house is already on the market. I'm sorry it came to this." It was the first genuine apology I had received from anyone in my family. 2 years after winning my lawsuit, I sat in the university library surrounded by medical textbooks and my study group. We were preparing for midterms, all of us exhausted but determined. My phone buzzed with a reminder about my therapy appointment later that afternoon. "I need to head out in an hour," I told the group, "but I'll be at the review session tonight." So much had changed since that day in court. After the ruling, my parents had been forced to sell some investments to repay the money within the 90-day deadline. Sophia and Mark had indeed sold their house, downsizing to an apartment. The $120,000 plus interest had been placed in a new trust, this time with my Aunt Cynthia as trustee, and ironclad provisions ensuring it could only be used for educational expenses. With my financial situation secured, I had been able to reapply to Washington University. They honored my previous acceptance, and I enrolled the following fall semester. Now, in my second year of pre-med, I was thriving academically despite the emotional turbulence of the past few years. The relationship with my family remained complicated. My parents had initially reacted with anger and blame, portraying themselves as victims of an ungrateful daughter. But as time passed and the public embarrassment faded, there had been tentative steps toward reconciliation. My mother called monthly, our conversations stilted, but gradually warming. She never directly apologized for taking the money, but she had begun acknowledging that things could have been handled differently. My father was less receptive, still maintaining they had done nothing wrong, though he no longer hung up when I called. Sophia was another story. She blamed me entirely for losing her dream home and had cut contact completely. I occasionally saw updates through mutual friends. She and Mark had separated briefly after the house sale, but were now trying to work things out. They were living in a rented townhouse and expecting their first child, a development that had softened some of Sophia's bitterness toward me. Mark surprisingly had reached out several times with friendly messages. He seemed genuinely happy that I was back on my educational path, even sending a card when I made the dean's list. The legal battle had taught me painful lessons about family trust and self-advocacy. In therapy, I worked through feelings of abandonment and the lingering question, why hadn't my parents valued my dreams the way they valued Sophia's? Some parents play favorites consciously or unconsciously, my therapist, Dr. Linden, had explained. It doesn't mean you're less worthy. It means they have limitations in how they express love and support. I had created legal safeguards for my finances, including a revocable trust for the money I was now earning through a prestigious research assistant position. Never again would I be financially vulnerable to others' decisions about my future. Beyond the practical lessons, the experience had transformed my view of family. DNA connections were no longer sufficient. I now valued relationships based on respect, honesty, and mutual support. My circle of chosen family had grown Jasmine, who had offered her couch when I had nowhere else to go. Ms. Winters, who had believed in me when my own parents didn't. Aunt Cynthia, who had stepped up to protect what my grandparents had intended for me. My perspective on forgiveness had evolved too. I no longer saw it as an all-or-nothing proposition, but as a gradual process that didn't require forgetting or even fully reconciling. I could forgive my parents for their limitations while maintaining boundaries that protected my well-being. During my first year back at university, I joined a support group for students estranged from their families. Hearing others' stories helped me feel less alone and inspired me to start an initiative providing resources for students navigating family financial betrayals. We offered guidance on legal options, connected students with pro bono attorneys, and created emergency funds for those suddenly cut off from family support. This work led to invitations to speak at financial literacy workshops, where I shared my experience as a cautionary tale about protecting educational funds. Trust is essential in families, I would tell audiences, but legal protections are sometimes necessary too. My roommate Priya often teased me about becoming the responsible student finance guru on campus. But behind her teasing was genuine admiration. "You took something horrible and turned it into a way to help others," she said once. "Not everyone would do that." My relationship with Sophia began to thaw slightly when she gave birth to my niece Emma. The first photo she sent, breaking months of silence, came with a simple message: "She has Grandma Margaret's eyes." It was her first acknowledgement of our shared loss of the grandparents who had loved us both, but had particularly championed my educational dreams. I responded with congratulations and a small gift for Emma, careful not to push for more than Sophia was ready to give. My mother visited campus that spring, her first time seeing my life at university. She walked around my dormitory, the labs where I worked, the libraries where I studied, with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it pride? Regret? Perhaps a mixture of both. Over coffee in the student center, she asked hesitantly about my future plans. "Medical school applications next year," I told her. "I'm focusing on programs with strong research components." She nodded, fiddling with her cup. "Your grandparents would be proud, Ruby. They always believed you would do something special." "I know," I said quietly. It was the closest we had come to discussing the past. As I walked her to her car, she paused. "I'm sorry, Ruby. We should have protected what your grandparents left for you. I see that now." The words I had waited years to hear. They didn't erase the past, but they opened a door to a possible future where our relationship might heal. That evening, I sat by the window in my dorm room, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From the devastation of discovering my parents' betrayal, to the victory in court, to the gradual painful process of rebuilding my life and some of my relationships, I had traveled a path I never would have chosen, but that had shaped me in profound ways. I had learned that sometimes fighting back isn't just about winning. It's about establishing that you value yourself enough to stand up when others won't. I had discovered that family is defined by actions rather than blood, and that chosen family can provide strength when biological family fails. Most importantly, I had found that while I couldn't control others' actions, I could control my response to them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason, the medical student I had been dating for the past 6 months. He understood the complexities of my family situation, without judgment, having weathered his own difficult relationship with his father. "Finished in the lab, still up for dinner?" I smiled, texting back an affirmative. My life was moving forward on my terms. The path hadn't been straight or easy, but it was authentically mine. Looking out at the campus buildings illuminated in the evening light, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. My grandparents had given me more than money. They had given me belief in my potential when my parents couldn't see it. Honoring that gift meant not just using the funds for my education, but living with the integrity and determination they had always seen in me. The future stretched before me with possibilities that once seemed lost forever. Whatever challenges came next, I would face them knowing my worth wasn't determined by others' estimation, but by my own actions and choices. That knowledge was perhaps the most valuable lesson from this painful journey, worth more than any college fund. 5 years have passed since I won my lawsuit and reclaimed my college fund. As I sit here in my small apartment near the medical school where I'm now completing my second year, I can hardly believe how much has changed. The journey hasn't been easy, but the growth and healing have been profound. After graduating with honors from Washington University, I was accepted into their medical program with a partial scholarship. The college fund my grandparents left me covered most of my remaining expenses, allowing me to focus on my studies without the crushing debt many of my classmates face. My relationship with my family has evolved in ways I never expected. My mother and I have rebuilt a fragile bond through years of honest conversations. She eventually acknowledged the favoritism that had defined my childhood and made genuine efforts to see me as an individual rather than just the responsible daughter. Our relationship will never be what it might have been without the betrayal, but it has its own authentic value now. My father took longer to come around. For almost 2 years after the lawsuit, he maintained that I had damaged the family beyond repair. The turning point came unexpectedly when he was diagnosed with heart problems 3 years ago. Facing his mortality, he reached out with a letter that finally contained the apology I had needed. "I was wrong, Ruby," he wrote. "Your grandparents trusted us to honor their wishes for your future, and we betrayed that trust. Even worse, we betrayed you. My pride kept me from admitting it, but I've always known the truth. I hope someday you can forgive me." We've had lunch together monthly since then. Sometimes the conversation flows easily. Sometimes we sit in awkward silence, but we're trying, and that matters more than perfection. Sophia's journey has been more complicated. After her divorce from Mark 2 years ago, she struggled financially for the first time in her life. The experience changed her perspective dramatically. She reached out on my birthday last year, and we met for coffee. "I didn't understand before," she admitted, her voice softer than I remembered. "Having to support myself, work jobs I don't love, worry about bills. I get it now. What Mom and Dad did to you was wrong, and I was wrong for accepting that money." Her apology wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. We're slowly rebuilding a relationship based on who we are now, rather than who we were. I have a genuine connection with my niece Emma, now a curious 4-year-old who loves when Aunt Ruby explains how things work. Mark and I maintained a friendly relationship even after his divorce from Sophia. He remarried last year and is expecting a child with his new wife. He still occasionally texts to check on my progress in medical school. The experience of losing and then reclaiming my college fund fundamentally changed how I approach finances and relationships. I've become passionate about financial literacy, especially for young women. During undergraduate breaks, I volunteered with organizations teaching high school girls about saving, investing, and protecting their assets. This work inspired me to start a small foundation using a portion of my savings and contributions from supporters. The Second Chance Educational Fund provides emergency grants to students whose family financial support has been unexpectedly withdrawn. We've helped 23 students continue their education despite family crises or betrayals. Through this foundation, I met Sarah, a pre-law student whose parents had diverted her college savings to their business. Helping her navigate legal options to recover her funds was deeply satisfying, like turning my painful experience into something constructive. My social circle now includes people who understand the complexity of family relationships. My closest friend Maria also experienced parental favoritism, though in her case it was her brother who received preferential treatment. Our shared experiences created a bond that needs no explanation or justification. I've approached romantic relationships with greater caution, aware of my tendency to overgive and self-sacrifice. 2 years ago, I met David, a surgical resident who had his own complicated family history. He understands my boundaries with my family, without taking it personally when I need to maintain distance during stressful periods. The most profound change has been internal. I no longer seek validation from others to confirm my worth. The betrayal forced me to define my value independently of my family's assessment, to trust my own judgment about what I deserve. In therapy, I've worked through the lingering effects of growing up as the less favored child. Dr. Linden helped me recognize patterns of people-pleasing and excessive responsibility that developed as I tried to earn the love and approval my sister received effortlessly. Breaking these patterns has been challenging, but liberating. I've maintained connections with my extended family, especially Aunt Cynthia, who stepped in as trustee of my college fund. She remains a source of unconditional support, the kind of advocate I never had in my parents during childhood. Reclaiming my college fund wasn't just about the money, though. That was certainly important for my education. It was about standing up for myself and honoring my grandparents' intentions. It was about refusing to accept that my dreams and needs were less important than my sister's wants. The money itself has been carefully managed. Besides covering my educational expenses, I've set aside a portion for future emergencies and another portion for eventually establishing a medical practice focused on underserved communities, fulfilling a dream I've had since high school. Last month, I visited my grandparents' graves for the first time in years. I brought flowers and sat beside their headstones, telling them about medical school, my foundation, and the lives I hope to impact as a doctor. I thanked them not just for the financial support that made my education possible, but for believing in me when others didn't, for seeing potential my parents overlooked. "I'm keeping my promise," I whispered to them. "I'm becoming the person you always believed I could be." As I move forward with my life and career, I carry important lessons from this experience. I've learned that sometimes you have to fight for what is rightfully yours, even when that fight is painful. I've discovered that family can be both your greatest wound and your path to healing. Most importantly, I've come to understand that while we can't control how others treat us, we can control how we respond and who we become in the aftermath. My story isn't primarily about betrayal anymore. It's about resilience, self-advocacy, and creating meaning from painful experiences. It's about learning that sometimes the hardest battles yield the most valuable victories, not just in tangible terms like education and career, but in self-knowledge and authentic relationships. If you've ever experienced betrayal by those who should have protected, you know that it doesn't define your worth or determine your future. Your value isn't diminished by others' failure to recognize it. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that ripples outward, potentially helping others find their courage too. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family pressure or expectations? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is both possible and necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into.